Greetings, my friends. By popular request, I'm going to cover the time I saw the 15-foot tall Sasquatch. We were camping roughly 40 miles north of Moosehead Lake, not quite to the Golden Road, and earlier in the day, Lady K and myself had both seen a UFO. It appeared to be about probably that big in the sky, tilted at a 45-degree angle, had 4 bright lights on it, and drifted kind of like this, silently. And even though I had a camera right on the car just a few feet from me, I was so shocked by the appearance and puzzled trying to figure out what I was looking at that I didn't get any footage of it. It kind of had a little bit of an appearance of like the Millennia Falcon. It appeared to be a metallic object, craft, kind of a dull gray with a little bit of black on it. I couldn't really make out windows or anything, but it seemed to have, I'll see if I can do a drawing. It wasn't like, you know, perfectly smooth. It wasn't like the classic. It had protuberances and angles and shit going on. And it drifted. And I'm going to say I probably observed it for 3 seconds, maybe 4 seconds. Difficult to say. I wasn't like, I don't know, you know, time didn't really, it was odd. And it drifted behind this tree, like I was looking up at it. It was probably, if I had to guess, it's really difficult to estimate the height and size of something like that, but it didn't appear to be at like, you know, jet level. If something was up at, you know, 30,000 feet, there'd be a lot of air and moisture between you, and it would have a little bit of a hazy feel. This was really clear. It appeared to be maybe at the height of like that one of those little Cessnas would fly at. So I don't know, a couple thousand feet perhaps. And it was 2 to 3 times, 4 times the size of a Cessna at that height. 5,000 feet. I don't know. You know, I don't think it was at 30,000 feet. And it drifted in behind the canopy of this tree, and it was no longer visible to me, and I was kind of like looking, I'm waiting for it to come out the other side of the tree. It never came out, and I like ran to try to get another look at it, and that was all I saw of it. So that was a little odd. Then round about, I'm going to guess and say it was probably around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Well, it might have been later than that. It might have been 6:30, something like that. It was you know, it was dinner time, and I believe it was in June. So we have, you know, pretty long summers up here in Maine. It doesn't get dark until about 9 o'clock, and where we were camped, we were in this really remote area that was a dead-end road. I'll see if I can throw up a Google satellite image for you guys. We had gone down the road, the dead-end road. We had reconned most of the side roads. There's a lot of them up there, but I was pretty confident that we were the only people up there. There wasn't a lot of people. I don't think we saw any people that day driving in there. And on this pond that we were at, 50-acre pond, 100-acre pond, you know, a small pond. It was the only campsite that we were camped at. We were at a bit of an elevation, and it sloped down, and the water was 150, 200 feet away from us, and there was hemlocks, pretty good sized hemlock trees, this big around, some pine trees intermixed with it, and we could see the pond between the trees. Lady K and I was standing there. We were observing a few little ducks and stuff on the pond, and I don't know, talking about stuff, maybe the UFO. And at some point, to my left, I caught this disturbance, which when I went to, you know how you can see better, you can see movement better with your peripheral vision, because the peripheral vision of a human eye is rich in rods. Rods are really good at picking up motion, and they're monochromatic. So they only pick up black and white, as opposed to the cones, which are focused primarily to the front of your vision, which detect color. Anyhow, I detected movement. I initially thought it was like a floater or something. It was so subtle. And I'm looking down at the spot, like it was, I saw it happen between this tree, and a little while later, I see it again. I'm kind of startled, and I'm like, well, that's a little odd. And maybe like the third time, I kind of mentioned to Lady K, I go, I'm seeing, and she goes, yeah, I'm seeing it too. And I go, you're seeing that thing? She goes, yeah. So I knew I wasn't hallucinating. I was confused as to what I was seeing, but I wasn't hallucinating. And statistically, it's unlikely Lady K and I was both hallucinating at the same time. So we were observing a real phenomenon. Over the period of the next 15 minutes or so, 10-15 minutes, this disturbance would cross between tree to tree, and it slowly became more substantial. I've compared it before to being somewhat like the Predator movie. Although, of course, in the Predator movie, they had to make the effect substantial enough for us to see it. This was really subtle. It was more subtle than the Predator effect. It was almost like a heat mirage or something, but it was localized. And we'd only see it between the hemlock trees. And I question that we wouldn't have saw it at all if it hadn't been for the backdrop of the lake behind it. In other words, if it had just been green forest, I'm not sure I would have picked up on it. So as this thing kept moving sporadically and unpredictably from left to right in our field of view, it started to become more substantial slightly. Like, there was a couple times when it looked almost like the Predator effect. It'd be this thing. You'd see it kind of quickly move between the trees. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And once again, even though I have a whole pile, like 5 cameras with me, I didn't film any of it. I was so focused on what was going on and so puzzled by what I was looking at. I wasn't thinking, Sasquatch or whatever. I was like, what is going on? Is that like, is there something causing heat down there? My mind's trying to search for a rational, scientific explanation for what I'm seeing, because it can't be a floater, because Lady K and I are both not seeing floaters. It's an independent phenomenon. Must be something natural. Like, what is it? What am I observing? Suddenly, and without warning, pretty much directly down in front of us, this impossibly large, solid black, 15-foot tall humanoid crossed between 2 hemlock trees. I didn't know at the time it was 15 feet tall. I just knew it was a giant, an impossibly huge giant. It shocked me so much that when it came into view, fully solid and material and inky black, I went, I audibly gasped. My mind was like just thrown into this state of chaos. I was like, oh, what the hell? And it moved fairly quickly. The distance it covered between the 2 trees couldn't have been more than 10 feet. And I think it covered it like I only remember it taking 1 step. Like it appeared to step out of a tree and then into a tree. We never saw it go into the tree over here, and I never saw it exit over there. Like, it was only solid between the trees. The tree it stepped out of was not big enough to hide the mass of this thing. This thing was so huge. And it was like you had taken no neck. You'd taken this little tiny head. Its head appeared to be too small for its body, and it had this massive, it was, of course we were looking at it in profile, but it had like, when it went to move, you could see it had massive shoulders, and the arms were ginormous and went down. I'm not sure how far they went. I've said before, about maybe to your knees, a little bit above you. They were definitely longer. They looked longer than a human. It looked a lot like a human. It was very humanoid, except that its legs appeared kind of odd, like they were shorter than they should have been. The arms appeared to be longer than they should have been, and it had no neck. And the head appeared to be kind of small for the bulk and the size of this thing. And right after I gasped and the thing disappeared behind the tree, I looked over at Lady K and I was like, did you? And she was like, yeah, I saw it. I mean, what do you do with that? I had talked to people. I had communicated to people. I was aware of people reporting Sasquatches, you know, cloaking, turning invisible, and levitating, and mind speak, and all this weird shit. And at that point in time, I'm a little ashamed to admit that I was pretty quick to dismiss those reports out of hand and kind of ridicule those people a little bit, because I didn't, you know, that shit's impossible, right? It's impossible. They gotta be confused. You know, maybe they're lying, or they're confused, or they're hallucinating. The typical trifecta, the three things that the debunkers love to throw out there. So probably within 30 seconds or so of this thing having gone into the tree, Lady K wanted to go down there, and I was like, all right, well, I'll stay up here and I'll make sure, you know, I'll direct you to the tree, the two trees, so that we didn't, because there was a little path that went down in that area, but I didn't want to confuse the trees, so I stayed up at the campsite, and she went down there. Well, Lady K's about 5'6", 5'8" or so. So, you know, Lady K's this big. This thing was 3 times her height. Fully 3 times her height. It was all of 15 feet. It might have been 16 feet, but it was at least 15 feet tall. I mean, I know how crazy that is. I've had plenty of people, even people that believe in Sasquatch, will say, there's none above 9 feet tall. There's none of them taller than 10 foot. You know, anybody saying that, they're just making that shit up. No, this was an impossibly large creature. And as soon as Lady K got down there, I scooted right down there, because I'm thinking, well, this thing's got to be right there, right? Or it must have left tracks. The tracks must be huge. This thing must have weighed, I don't know, a couple thousand pounds, 4,000 pounds, 3,000 pounds. I mean, who the hell knows? It was huge. I get down there, there's not a sign of anything having gone through there. There's no marks on the. It was fairly hard packed, but it was kind of mossy ground down there. And right where it had gone, there was a moose trail, but there was no physical sign that I could determine. And in the direction that it headed in, the woods got kind of thick in around the pond. Now, if that had been a moose, say a moose had run through there, and we had scooted down there, we would have heard like cracking and snapping, and, you know, you would have been able to hear it. There was no, and not only that, but you would smell a moose. You know, a moose will leave especially if it's a still, kind of moist environment, their odor will linger for a little bit. You know, a couple minutes after they pass through an area, it kind of has a little bit of a horse smell to it. You know, it smells different than a horse, but if you haven't smelt a moose and you smelt a horse, I mean, you know, if you were in the woods and you smelt it, you might recognize it. There was nothing. There was no indication that a giant had passed through that area. So that was the first Sasquatch type creature that I observed. The second one, so the second Sasquatch I saw was every bit as strange. That happened either the following year or might have been 2 years later. We were camped right in an old logging road. For any of you guys that have driven the logging roads, they frequently will have ditches, at least on one side, sometimes on both sides. The one that we were at had kind of a drop off on one side, and then a pretty good size, you know, 3 foot deep or so ditch on the upper side. And I'd gotten up in the middle of the night to use the facilities, so I had hopped out. We were sleeping inside the SUV at the time. I hopped out, and I was standing there peeing, and I'm looking over the hood of the car, and it's only like 15 feet or so to the ditch. The ditch is right there. And it was dark, but it was light enough that I could, you know, I could see stuff. I could look around and see things. I mean, I can't remember what the moon must have been out, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to see that clearly. But I'm looking over, and I'm like, wow, that's a really big stump there. And then I got to thinking, I thought, I don't really remember that stump being there in that ditch. And then my mind starts processing stuff, like it doesn't make sense to have a stump in a ditch. It would kind of defeat the purpose of the ditch. The ditch wouldn't work very well. And when I came to that realization, I thought, that's not a stump. There can't be a stump there. So I came to the realization that there shouldn't be a stump in that ditch. The very same instant that I thought that thought, the stump leaped up to a height of which I determined later was about 7.5 feet, and it would have covered an embankment that would have been, well, the ditch was like 3 feet deep from the road, but it was, you know, higher because it went uphill a little bit. It was like no problem. It was 4 feet or whatever. It just went like this. I mean, it went from being a stump, I'm assuming it was looking at me, to it just erupted out of that ditch like full speed, instant full speed, like an Olympic sprinter, and did maybe 2, 3, you know, strides. There wasn't really anything obscuring me looking at it. It was somewhat open in that part of the forest. And then the weirdest thing happened. It was like a Hollywood special effects. It was like somebody took a handful of flour or sand and just threw into the air. It just dematerialized. Like it went from being this 7.5 foot tall human looking thing to just dust. It just dissipated into nothing. There was nothing there. I mean, I still don't even know. I mean, what do you make of that? What is that? I had never heard anybody tell me that they'd seen a Sasquatch turn to dust, so I was really shocked. And I don't remember it making any noise either. And the next morning I went over there, and I didn't find any tracks. That's another thing that was really weird, because the ditch was gravelly, but you still would have thought you could have, I mean, because when it leaped out of that ditch, it should have like dug in. Now, not that I'm an expert tracker, but you know, I have won a tracking contest on $10 million Bigfoot bounty. I wasn't even trying. We were trying to lose, and we still won the contest. So I think if it left tracks, I would have noticed them. I didn't notice any tracks. That's it, my friends. Those are my 2 Sasquatch encounters. Both of them high strangeness. This is one of the reasons I am on a campaign to champion the eyewitnesses, because people are seeing darn strange shit. They're not confused. They're not lying. They're not hallucinating. They're seeing an unexplainable phenomenon, and we should be asking the questions about, how is this possible? What does this tell us about the phenomenon? Instead of wasting all this energy that the debunkers and skeptics waste trying to, you know, explain away every sighting, because, you know, you got false memories, you're confused, you're hallucinating, you got something not right up here. I do not believe that is the case. I think the majority of eyewitness encounters are credible and deserve our attention. So if you guys have had a strange encounter, or if you know of one similar, please leave it below in the comments. I would love to hear about it, and thank you so much for spending your time here